A lot of games out there don't make the best first impression, but sometimes first impressions just aren't right. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 games they made you believe were bad. Starting off at number 10, it's Alien Isolation. Here's a game that's widely considered to be a modern-day horror classic, but you wouldn't know if you read most of the reviews back when it came out. The game did not get glowing reviews. Well, it got a few of them, but most writers at the time complained about the game's length, surprise deaths, and repetition, leading to a not bad but not stellar 79 average critical rating on Metacritic. The user score was a lot better at 84, which doesn't quite match the positivity I normally hear about the game, but it's still a lot better. I'll say a lot of the critical complaints are fair, but there's just no other game that manages to capture the atmosphere of the Alien franchise like this one. The design of the space station, the way the computers look, the hallways, it's all literally perfect. The game still looks extremely good even now, too. The Alien itself is still one of the most advanced stalkers ever put into a game. Its AI routines are more elaborate and complex than pretty much anything we see in games, even 10 years later. In a lot of ways, Alien Isolation was ahead of its time as a horror game, and it still kind of amazes me it came out in 2014, because it still doesn't look like it. The Order 1886. This early PlayStation 4 title got absolutely lambasted by critics when it came out back in 2015. It got a pretty abysmal 63 on Metacritic, which might as well be a 3 for a first-party AAA like this. Critics complained about the short campaign length, the dull plot, the anemic shooting, which, to be fair, are issues with the game, but I do think it's a better game than its critics gave it credit for. The thing that really stands out about the game, at least to me, is that it's a technical showcase. Even though it's damn near 10 years old, it still looks absolutely incredible. Even the faces, which are usually the dead giveaway that a game is old, but they really hold up.
I have received word of numerous casualties and reports of destruction to the London hospital. And now this!
It helps the game has a kind of hyper-real art style, so the characters are just stylized enough that they look really good. It's one of those games that's really more than the sum of its parts. It is your bog-standard third-person action shooter with no real extra thrills to keep things interesting other than a few exotic steampunk weapons, but it's super polished and flashy, and I don't know, the shortcomings kind of don't matter. It's one of those games that I think people just appreciate for what it is. It's a linear, story-driven AAA game without any of the fluff. They don't needlessly pad out the campaign, there's no side quests or tacked-on RPG systems. It's just a game, and for a lot of us out there, that's really, really refreshing. It's one of those games that would greatly benefit from a sequel, but after the critical beating the game got, that's just never going to happen. The thing about this one is that the user score isn't flattering, it's just 5 points higher at 68, but I think that is kind of overly harsh depending on who you ask. And it does show that there are fans for this game. It's far from perfect, yes, but there is a lot to like in The Order 1886.
Target down!
Let's reload.
At number 8 is Dragon's Dogma 1. The thing about the original Dragon's Dogma, the Metacritic score wasn't terrible. It got a 75 average from critics, which isn't the best, but you'd think the game was a complete failure from all the discourse at the time. To a lot of people, the game was just another failure along the same lines as DMC, Lost Planet 3, Dead Rising 3, and many more. There was kind of just a prevailing stink of badness around the whole project. In reality, I think a lot of critics just didn't know what to make of it. Dragon's Dogma is a game that just does its own thing. Didn't really play like anything else out there. Has some Dead Rising DNA, a little Monster Hunter in there, but even Monster Hunter still hadn't broken through to the West back in 2012. The game does have problems, even to this day. I don't want to just ignore that. The original release did feel kind of empty at times, and the performance was not good on the Xbox 360. And it's also important to keep in mind the version everyone plays now is the improved Dark Arisen version, which adds a bunch of content, makes a lot of noticeable improvements to the original. But even still, now that we've seen Dragon's Dogma 2, Dragon's Dogma 1 can look primitive at times. Hell, it looked primitive at times anyways, okay? Even the Dark Arisen version. But now, it it is pretty much universally seen as a misunderstood classic. Maybe the game was a victim of some kind of perceived bias against Japanese games at the time, or maybe reviewers just didn't get it. But if anybody talks about it these days, Dragon's Dogma is always framed as a flawed gem. It is a game with a lot of rough spots, but it's overall better than the reviews from 2012 would have you believe. And number 7 is Prototype 2. This 2012 follow-up to the original Prototype was mostly viewed by reviewers and fans as a disappointment back in the day, but it did have a lot to live up to. The original game is a banger, and a lot of people thought it failed to live up to it. It is definitely different. It's got a more streamlined control scheme that can be uncharitably interpreted as dumbing down. The story was controversial among fans of the series. It made the protagonist of the first game, Alex Mercer, into the bad guy.
I gave you the Mercer virus. That's what they call it, right? The same virus 2 years in a row. And the same Black Watch, here to save New York.
There's no denying it is a different beast than the first game. It is immediately obvious from the jump, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Yes, you start off a lot weaker compared to Prototype 1. The skill tree is not as interesting overall, but Prototype 2 has a lot of positives for a weird open world superhero-ish kind of game. The most noticeable thing is, of course, that the city looks way better than the first game. It's got a lot more bespoke content in the missions, and that makes it for a more varied experience. Getting to explore some interiors that aren't just boring warehouses, that's an appreciated thing. One thing that is a straight-up improvement of the first is they brought back weaponization from their previous Hulk Ultimate Destruction games, where you can transform objects into weapons to use to fight enemies, and whoo, is that great. There are a few things that are straight up bad about the game, though, like how they locked all the open world activities behind microtransactions, or the abysmal PC port, which was basically unplayable for years. The DLC comes packed with the game now, and the PC port has a fan patch that fixes a lot of the bugs from the game, so it is very playable now. The user scores are not a lot higher. They're just 4 points higher at 78, but it goes to show that there are people out there that appreciate what Radical Entertainment was trying to do with this game. And number 6 is The Saboteur, another entry from the late 2000s, early 2010s open world game-ish thing. It was made by Pandemic, the guys behind the Mercenary series, Destroy All Humans, the original beloved Star Wars Battlefront games, and pour one out for Pandemic. They were really one of the greats. The Saboteur is basically a spiritual successor to the Mercenaries games, but it has a very different feeling. Rather than it being total chaos all the time, the Saboteur is about carefully planned destruction with gameplay that's not quite like any other open world game out there. There is this whole color gimmick, which doesn't really serve any gameplay function, but the game just kind of works despite the goofy plot. To me, the things that really make this game stand out are the many interesting skills you can unlock by completing gameplay challenges, and the stealth, which is closer to the social stealth of like a Hitman game, because you're mostly like stealing enemy uniforms and silently thinning out enemy bases before blowing them up with carefully placed bundles of dynamite. It's a really fun and satisfying game overall, but even if it can be a little janky at times, critics dismissed it with an average of 73, while user scores were more positive at 79. The voice acting's cheesy, the absurd nudity DLC was embarrassing, and anytime your guy tried to climb something, it looks ridiculous, but this open world game is actually one of my favorite open world games. It's just really fun to play. And number 5 is Mad Max, another Falcon classic, another game totally dismissed by critics, unless you consider me a critic. If you go back to my poorly made before you buy, A, you can really see how much better my content here at gameranx is nowadays, but B, you can see my propensity for being right about games. A lot of reviewers just straight up hated this game. It got a 69 on Metacritic, which is not nice in this case. And before you start asking what the hell happened here, you gotta remember that this is a game that got Rise of the Ronin, more or less. It came out September 1st, 2015, the same day as Metal Gear Solid 5. It was a game nobody had high hopes for, but I got it back when it was new. Again, I did the before you buy, and it's actually pretty great. User scores show that I'm not the only person with that opinion either. The user scores rate the game a full 10 points higher than the critic scores, rating it a 79, which is a lot closer to accurate, although I'd put it in the mid-80s personally. What makes Mad Max unique among open world games is the car combat, which is weighty and excellent. Also, the ground-based fighting is really solid. It's heavily inspired by the Arkham games, and if you're going to copy, you copy from the best, right? The open world is absolutely beautiful, and while the plot's really basic, it has the Mad Max charm, and it's a lot more bleak than the story we got in Mad Max Fury Road, but there's also a weird beauty to it. I don't know, some people might think it's boring, but I think there's something just really mesmerizing about this game. I mean, even back in 2015, people were talking about everybody's attention span being shot, and this game just kind of is like, yeah, no, I think if you give people something to chew on, they will chew on it. And this just feels right for a Mad Max game. Super atmospheric, super pretty, super fun to play, easily one of the best movie tie-in games ever made. On first glance, it might seem like a boilerplate open world game, but it's super polished, it's complete, and it's got this haunting atmosphere that is just totally unique.
We can see the camp from up there without risk of detection. Over here! Hey, over! Come look!
And number 4 is Alpha Protocol. It's one of those games where all the worst things the critics say about it are true, but it's still awesome. I mean, it's got a brilliant premise. It's a spy RPG with a strong emphasis on creating a reactive story that actually changes in significant ways depending on your choices. Unfortunately, it's buggy, it's kind of ugly, it's horribly unbalanced, it's obvious that Obsidian bit off more than they could chew with it, but even with all its flaws, I think it's a pretty good game. It may be the most reactive RPG I've ever seen, with the smallest choices having major ramifications at times.
What the hell's going on? Why did you drug me?
We need to get the location of this facility confidential, especially if you got kidnapped and questioned.
You mean like now? Real friendly welcome to a new recruit.
We're not in the business of making friends. Judging from your dossier, neither are you.
Let me guess. You're not done hazing me yet.
The problem is, you'd never know it unless you played through the game at least twice. And how many reviewers back then actually did that? I'll answer that for you. It's not a lot. If any, even, honestly. I certainly don't play through a game more than one time before doing a before you buy. I don't even play through a game sometimes even one time before doing a before you buy. They are our first impressions of the latest games releasing, keep in mind. Is it really first impressions if you've played 120 hours? I think not. Anyway, knowing what you're getting into ahead of time is pretty important, and here's a tip. Put points into pistol skills and you'll just never lose. The other guns all suck. Even now, the game is still kind of buggy as hell, and most of the levels aren't actually all that interesting. It's kind of a workman-like game in presentation, but the reactivity of the story is just, I mean, nothing is on its level. It's incredibly reactive, and that's what keeps me coming back despite everything. Maybe if another game came along and did what Alpha Protocol does, but better, I would judge this game more harshly, but nothing else has. Everyone always complains that games never actually have your choices matter. There's no real consequences for this action. It's not really that reactive. But hey, here's one that does in spades. At least some people appreciate what Alpha Protocol tried to do because its user score is 9 points higher than its critical one at 72, which is either way too low or just about right depending on how many times the game has crashed on you recently. It's got a lot of problems, but Alpha Protocol is extremely good when it's good.
American. Nasri said nothing about an American.
I'm not looking to advertise my presence, only to do business.
Business, eh?
Check with Nasri if you don't believe me. He's waiting for me, and my down payment.
I call ahead. Go on through.
Can't believe you bluffed those guards.
And number 3 is Star Wars Bounty Hunter, an interesting one I always assumed was relatively well reviewed, but going back and looking at the Metascore shows that no, critics did not like this game. It's got a 65 critical score, but the user score is like way higher. It's got 13 points higher at 78. It's an Attack of the Clones tie-in game. Came out about 6 months after the movie, and it has you play as Jango Fett hunting bounties across the galaxy. So pretty much what you'd expect from a mediocre tie-in game. But this is, a much better game than I think a lot of people expected. Playing it takes a little getting used to. You got a lot of tools, and the levels are wide and vertical. And of course, there's the usual amount of jankiness that comes with a movie tie-in game. The thing that this game really has going for it is that it's super fun and a very satisfying game to play. You're jetpacking around, blowing away bad guys, knocking guys out to collect their bounties. It's a fun, arcadey experience. It doesn't always look the best, but who cares? It's a great game. Nothing more, nothing less. And number 2 is Spider-Man Web of Shadows, a game where the critical reception is way off from the user scores. Web of Shadows has a Metacritic score of 68 compared to its user score of 84. That's a massive gap. I don't know if critics were just sick of Spider-Man games at this point or what, but there's no way Web of Shadows is a 68. It's actually one of the best Spider-Man games, and that's a pretty high bar. The combat is an evolution of the fighting system seen in the Treyarch Spider-Man games, and it's the best that these games got under Activision.
Stop this, cat! Keep doing this, Felicia!
It takes a little getting used to, but with enough practice, you can rack up insane combos fairly easily by switching between standard Spider-Man and the black suit, which each have their own unique skill trees and totally different fighting styles. The integration of the black suit into gameplay is honestly better than Sony Spider-Man 2. The combat really does elevate this game because the other aspects do fall short. Peter Parker's voice, for one, is,
Where's Cage and his search party? The civilian volunteers! Pretty redhead, arm and a gas! You are no help!
That APC! We got vehicles inbound!
MJ!
I rag about it every time this game comes up, and I think everybody does. But seriously, could he be any more annoying and whiny sounding? Anytime this guy talks, it's like a cheese grater to my eardrums. This version of New York City is also really ugly and really empty. And beyond that, the presentation is almost completely lacking in cutscenes. The whole game feels kind of rushed and slapped together at times, but all the stuff that's good is so good, it just doesn't matter. Web of Shadows is one of those flawed masterpiece type games, and if Activision had only given these guys a little more time, it probably could have been the best Spider-Man game, period. As it is, though, it's just very good, which still isn't bad, obviously. Kind of the opposite of bad. And finally, at number 1, the Dynasty Warriors series. Man, for a while, reviewers just hated these games, huh? The first real game in the series, Dynasty Warriors 2, got more positive reviews back when it came out, but it wasn't long before reviewers were turning on the series in masse. If there's one thing reviewers value above all else, it's evolution. If a game comes out that's mostly the same as the previous game in the series, then it doesn't matter if the game is actually much better, the score is going to get docked for it. Some series manage to slip by for whatever reason, like the Yakuza games, which have always reviewed pretty well, but for whatever reason, the Dynasty Warriors games never got a pass. For a while, especially during the 360 era, these games really could only get 60s. That was the best they could hope for, no matter how good or bad they actually were, which is stupid, because most of the time these games were quite good. Great even, if you're a fan. But the reviews pretty much painted every game with the same brush, so it's hard to tell which ones were actually the half-assed expansion pack sequels, and which ones were the games that they actually put a lot of work into. Of course, Dynasty Warriors 9 was still a huge disappointment. Again, go back to my before you buy, was not happy with this one. Like, Dynasty Warriors is such a fun formula. I don't understand putting it in an MMORPG-esque open world at all. I still don't to this very day. I just don't get the motive behind that. It's such a weird idea, but whatever. I'm past it. Dynasty Warriors is past it. Like, a lot of the mainline titles are just absolutely excellent, but you'd never be able to tell based on the Metacritic scores.
Something happened to me! never know defeat. Show me what you've got. This capital and the influence of the Imperial Court belong to us. You fools must stay away.
I do have a couple of bonuses for you. God Hand first. Critics rated it 73 on average. Users gave it a 92, which is a little higher. Makes sense, though, because God Hand is kind of the definition of a love it or hate it game. If you click with it, it's amazing. If you don't, it's miserable. I think everybody who actually plays it, at least nowadays, knows what they're in for and appreciates what it's trying to do. I do. I love this game back on the PS2, and I did not appreciate the critical response at all. It's one of those games where you just have to play it on the game's terms, because if you go in with preconceived notions about how a game's supposed to be, like a lot of reviewers did at the time, you're not going to get it. And to be frank, this probably actually influenced the kind of give it a chance approach that I've given games that we've talked about in this very video, like Mad Max. God Hand's great. And finally, Kingsfield Ancient City. If there's anything to be learned from this list, it's sometimes all it takes for a game to be critically reevaluated is for the developers to come out with a genre-defining masterpiece a few years later. From Software are critical darlings now, but for most of the developer's life, that was not the case. Reviewers were not kind to their games, and that includes the Kingsfield series. These games were called slow, boring, hard, and ugly. And honestly, all of these are kind of true in certain respects, but you'd also be ignoring all of the things that make them, and especially this particular one, the Ancient City, great. Yes, they are slow, they are punishingly hard, but the world design and the exploration is fantastic. So much of the design of their later games can be seen in the Ancient City, from its complex interlocking world, to the mysterious NPCs, to the bullshit traps. It's a proto-Dark Souls, and while the actual combat is pretty weak, everything else about it is just haunting and intriguing. Modern fans of From might still hate this one, like the critics who gave it an average of 60 on Metacritic, but I think the user rating of 84 is a lot more accurate. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time, right here on Game Ranks.